I would like to thank Osakon and Dr. Mishra for asking me to speak on phaco in compromised rhexis. A successful phacoemulsification calls for an intact rhexis, and in most of our cataract surgery cases, the rhexis is indeed intact. However, the literature shows that in a certain percentage of the cases, there may be a rhexis runoff to the periphery. In fact, in a Moorfields paper published in the American Journal in 2015, the incidence of rhexis tear was found to be 1.5%. And in the same paper, the posterior capsular rent occurred with the frequency of 1.65%. So, when we are confronted with a rhexis runaway situation, we have an incomplete rhexis, how do we proceed further? Do we perform phacoemulsification or convert to a safer non-phaco technique? If we decide to go ahead with phacoemulsification, what kind of technique do we employ? Do we perform in the back phaco or we perform phaco at a different location? After the successful completion of phaco, if we have decided to go ahead with phaco, what about the intraocular lens? Do we use a single piece hydrophobic acrylic lens or a 3-piece hydrophobic acrylic lens? And where do we place the lens? Where do we locate the lens? In the capsular bag or in the ciliary sulcus? So in my presentation, rather a video presentation today, I'm going to address some of these issues, and I have no financial interest in the contents of my presentation. We should be familiar with the timing of rhexis tear because it has an important bearing in what you do when you encounter a situation where the rhexis has run off to the periphery. We also should be familiar with the risk factors for rhexis runaway so that we can counsel the patients better in the preoperative period about this risk, and the surgeon as well as the operation theater setup can also be better prepared to deal with this eventuality if it happens. So this was an intumescent cataract, a very high positive intralenticular pressure. Anterior capsule was stained with trypan blue dye, and as a soft shell technique is being used, I initiated off the rhexis with the cystitome. At one point, I realized that I don't have much purchase on the capsular flap and it has a tendency to run to the periphery. So I injected a viscoelastic in the peripheral area, not in the central area, and started using my Utrata forceps. Again, the rhexis had a tendency to run to the periphery. Helon GV was injected in the peripheral part, but in spite of all these measures, the rhexis indeed ran to the periphery. So I decided that I will continue with a phacoemulsification in this situation, in this particular case. I would require a larger anterior capsular opening, so I used my microrhexis scissors and forceps from the side port as well as the main incision to enlarge the central anterior capsular opening. I don't want to be left with any capsular tags or redundant capsular flaps, because in such a situation they tend to jump into the phaco port or the aspiration port during irrigation aspiration. So you need a descent about 5 to 5.5 millimeter of capsular opening to do a good phacoemulsification in this situation. And this was again not a wraparound tear because you can see the capsular flaps, they are all everted, so it has not yet gone to the posterior capsule. So hydrosteps are not really required. I don't perform cortical cleaving hydrodissection in any intumescent cataract because there are no adhesions. And in this case, if you perform a hydrodissection, you have a chance of enlarging the rhexis tear. It may become a wraparound tear. It may get extended. So we would not do it. So I start off phaco by creating a deep pit in the center of the nucleus using a very high phaco power. And once I'm working within the depth of the nucleus, I use my Sinskey hook to chop. While chopping, you'll see that most of my maneuvers are not really confined within the capsular bag, because when it comes to lateral separation, there may be inadvertent transmission of forces to the capsular bag, and this may result in further extension of the rhexis tear, which has now stopped short of the equator and which may become a wraparound tear. So the lateral separation has to be done very carefully, very gently, making sure that not much of force is utilized. Uh, the surgery is performed at a more anterior plane. The nucleus has a tendency to come to the anterior plane because there is discontinuity of the rhexis in this location, and sometimes we may feel a little safer also to confine our activities at a little anterior plane. So it goes without saying that you need to use copious amount of dispersive OVD like Viscoat. Dispersive OVD top-up is done quite frequently, not only to deepen the anterior chamber when you come out with your irrigation devices, the phaco handpiece or irrigation handpiece, but also when you want to deepen the anterior chamber. You don't want the anterior chamber to become shallow. So this also protects the corneal endothelium to a large extent. While rotating the nucleus, make sure that your rotational maneuvers are performed very gently, and everything dispersive OVD will be injected before the phaco handpiece is taken out of the anterior chamber. The cortex is removed by irrigation aspiration. I decided to use a 3-piece hydrophobic acrylic IOL in the sulcus in this case. So the incision was enlarged from 2.8 to 3 millimeters. You have to ensure that the leading haptic does not go into the capsular bag. It has to go anterior to the anterior capsule. So you have to be very careful about it, so that the haptics ultimately land up in the ciliary sulcus. We don't want it to be going through the area of the defect and then enlarging creating a posterior capsular rent and going into the posterior segment. The trailing haptic is likewise compressed and then kept carefully in the sulcus. I also achieve posterior the buttonholing of the optic through the anterior capsular opening, and the lens is quite well centered, and I was pretty happy with the intraoperative outcome of this patient. Postoperatively, the patient has been followed up over a long period of time. You can see that the lens is very well centered, and you can also see the rhexis margin, and this is the area where it had gone to the periphery. So friends, in summary, though we know that rhexis is paramount for safe phacoemulsification, we do come across situations where the rhexis has run off to the periphery. So further management options in these compromised situations depend upon a number of factors. The surgeon experience is very important, the type of cataract that we are dealing with, the location and timing of the rhexis tear out, and absence or presence of significant comorbidities. As for me, who has been doing phaco for the last 25 years, I would still like to convert to a manual SICS technique if I am dealing with a patient who has a very hard cataract, a very shallow anterior chamber, compromised corneal endothelium, and rhexis tear has happened just opposite to the clear corneal incision. So there are various management options depending upon the factors I've just mentioned. In case you happen to be a younger colleague, not very sure about your phaco techniques, you can just close the case and refer the patient out for further management to your mentor. If you know how to perform SICS, well, perform a manual SICS. Extracapsular cataract extraction is not much preferred today, though it can be done. And phaco can still be performed. You need to decide on which level you have to perform the phaco, endocapsular or at a different plane. And after successful completion of phaco, you must use an appropriate intraocular lens. Friends, in conclusion, I'd like to say that good phaco is possible in rhexis tear situations if you have followed the guidelines which I have discussed in my presentation. Thank you very much for your kind attention.